Please welcome Ms. Stacey Abrams. So our structure is open the stage for 2 minutes, and then we will ask questions. We've already asked a few questions from the session. We'll repeat those for you. So we'll go ahead and make the open statement.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mount Ephraim, for having me back. It's my pleasure to be here again. And my name is Stacey Abrams, and I intend to be the next governor of Georgia. I grew up in a family that struggled to stay above the poverty line, but my parents never struggled to know what was right. They raised us with 3 values: go to church, go to school, and take care of each other. They said go to church because they wanted us to be grounded in an ethic and a faith that was larger than ourselves. But they also taught us never to use our faith to hurt others, to discriminate, or to disparage. They taught us to use your faith to defend and to lift people up. They taught us to go to school because public education was the center part of their life, and they knew that it was the best guarantee for their children. My mom was the first and only one of her 7 siblings to finish high school. My dad's the first man in his family to go to college. And my parents went on to not only go to college, my mom went to graduate school, became a college librarian, and then she became a Methodist minister, as did my father. And so I grew up understanding that not only do you want to learn, but you want to learn as much as you can to serve as many as you can. And the third job they told us we had was take care of each other. And even though the lights got cut off, sometimes we had no running water, sometimes we were on that orange commodity cheese, my parents would take us to go volunteer because they told us no matter how little you have, there's someone with less, and your job is to serve that person. My dad's way of putting it was even more simple. He said having nothing is not an excuse for doing nothing. And that is why I've spent the last 11 years serving the state of Georgia as a state representative. The last 7 years as the House Democratic leader, fighting Republicans when I needed to, but working together to always serve our families. Under my leadership, we have advanced education. We got money for transit for the first time in 45 years. I helped grandparents raising grandchildren get access to $15 million more per year to take care of their families. And as the next governor, I will educate bold and ambitious children from cradle to career. I will absolutely make certain that we build a thriving and diverse economy in all 159 counties. And I will make certain that we expand Medicaid in the state of Georgia so that no family has to worry about their health care. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Just to bring you up, you can stand and see either one. At the press club debate last night, a question challenged both of you as not having a previous statewide position as a qualification for being governor. How did you feel about that question?
Well, I think the answer is that I'm 44 years old, so I've been working my way up.
That neither of the last 2 governors had held statewide positions.
Well, I will say this. I may not have held a statewide position, but I've been all over the state. I've been in more than 155 counties. I have served in the state of Georgia, not just as the Democratic leader who helped 62 members serve their districts, but on my own, I went across the state helping Democrats build back power. And that's why I'm running for governor, because I know the state of Georgia. Not just the parts I'm from, but the parts that need help and need people to pay attention. I think that that's an unfair question that was asked because it's one of the distinctions they're trying to draw, but I will say this. I'd rather have new leadership that can do new ideas than the same old leadership we've had for the last 15 years.
So just to continue to catch you up, you mentioned that you were in favor of Medicaid expansion. What other ideas do you have for improving health care for all Georgians?
Well, Medicaid expansion is the center of this because Medicaid pays for so much. When President Obama created the Affordable Care Act, in order to provide for everyone, they poured the money for rural hospitals into Medicaid. They poured the money for our military veterans into Medicaid. They poured the disproportionate share, the money that paid for poor people to go to hospitals, into Medicaid. So until we expand Medicaid, we're actually giving away money we've relied on for the last 40 years. But Medicaid is more than just about health care. It's about mental health and substance abuse treatment, which our families desperately need. It's about saving rural hospitals. It's about creating 50,000 jobs. But it's also about lowering the cost for everyone else. If you're a senior citizen about to be put in a nursing home, if we expand Medicaid, you will actually have the resources you need for in-home health care so you can avoid going to a nursing home. Medicaid covers more than just poor families. It covers all of our families. And it helps reduce the cost for not only those on Medicaid, but anyone in the state of Georgia who receives health insurance.
Thank you. How would you improve what changes, if any, would you make to the existing HOPE program?
So let's be clear. Hope is not gone. Hope has never been gone. Hope was in jeopardy because we lost money during the Great Recession and the Republicans threatened to slash it. And my response was to do what you do as a leader, which is to save as much as you can for as many as you can. There are those who have only focused on the college scholarship, and I focused on that too. And because of that, every student in the state of Georgia who graduates from the high school with a B average gets 80 to 90% of the full Hope Scholarship tuition. They don't get the whole thing because the Republicans are in charge, and they said no, but we got as much as we could. But in addition, I had to think about the 4-year-olds who are going to pre-K. And I fought with the governor of Georgia, and by his own admission, it was because of my work that he agreed to expand and keep a full day, full week of pre-K. And on technical colleges, my first responsibility was to make certain that technical college remedial courses stayed in place. Because most folks who were losing their jobs didn't remember 8th grade algebra. They needed the remedial courses so they could begin to take those technical college classes. And then I asked my opponent and my colleague, Ms. Evans, to carry legislation, and she did an amazing job. And I give her great credit for that. But to move forward.
Focus on what you would do.
No, I am, but this is part of what I would do. Because part of what I did was work with people with whom I didn't agree to get what we had to get done. What we have to do is go beyond that, but we have to know where we stand. And where we stand is that Hope has $700 million a year going to a merit-based scholarship, where 100% of students have access. But what we need to do is cover those students who are never going to get Hope because they don't have a B average. I come from a family of strong C's and some D's doing the best they can, and every student willing to work should have the right to go to college. And that is why I'm the candidate who's talking about debt-free college, about making certain that need-based aid is what we do next. I don't want to expand a merit-based system when what we really have to do is invest in a need-based system so that anyone who wants to go to college can afford to go to college.
Thank you. Okay, I think we caught up now. Yeah, okay. This is for both of you. Each question is for both of you, unless otherwise indicated. So Governor Deal made a big deal out of recently that now Georgia is fully funding K-12 education, which means that for the last 16 years, Georgia children have been shortchanged. At the time these budgets were adopted, how did each of you deal with that contemporaneously at the time? Let's go back to Ms. Evans first, because she.
Thank you. Well, it's really nice that in an election year the Republicans decided they would fully fund the education formula. I wish they'd do it all the other years too. But what we've got to do is look at what is this funding formula saying about where dollars go. We've got to make sure that those dollars are going to where they need to go to most. And we all know that it costs more to educate a child living in poverty than one that does not. And right now our funding formula does not recognize this and make sure that the appropriate amount of funds get directed to schools that are serving a large number of students that are living below the poverty line. We've got to change that. We've got to make sure that we're getting the resources where they need to go. I believe there are so many things that affect learning that go on outside the classroom. If a child comes to school and they're hungry, or they need hearing aids, or there's violence at home, we can't expect those kids to go into the classroom and do their very best. And as amazing as teachers are, they can't fix all those problems during the school day. We've got to invest in wraparound services to meet all of our kids and our students where they are so that they can get rid of the problems and the distractions that are keeping them from focusing on learning and our teachers from focusing on teaching. So I have always been in favor of more funding for education, and that's not just K through 12, but that's access to higher education as well. And that's why when the Hope cuts were on the table, those were implemented through the state budget. And I voted against that budget because I didn't want to do anything to cut dollars from higher education. And facts are really important, so I just want to make it really clear that 100% of high school students graduating with a B average do not have access to Hope scholarships. Number one, they don't have access to a full tuition Hope scholarship unless they're either the valedictorian or salutatorian of their class, or they have a 1200 on the SAT. And even if they have a B, if they haven't engaged in whatever rigor courses, this state has determined that was a part that was snuck into this bill, co-authored by my opponent and Republicans. You have to take a certain number of rigor courses now even if you have a B, you may not be able to get even a partial Hope Scholarship. And there's a gap that families simply can't fill. I wouldn't have been able to fill it. And it's important that we understand that the Hope Scholarships promise is missing.
Thank you. So let's try to keep it down to a minute to your answer so we can get through it and get a little bit more time on that, on this
I
one.
appreciate that. I am deeply disappointed that in this space we are continuing to have a false debate. And the reality is that I helped to save the Hope Scholarship. I saved it for college students, for pre-K students, 500,000 pre-K students, 100,000 college students with the colleges there on the Hope Scholarship that I preserved. And technical college has been extended because I co-sponsored the legislation that made it so. And while I give absolute credit to Ms. Evans for the work that she has done, I am deeply disappointed that we continue to have a false debate. Because you can take credit without disparaging other people. Because that's what leadership is about. Leadership is about getting good work done and doing the best you can for as many as you can. And you can't, you're entitled to your own opinion, you're not entitled to your own facts. But let's get to the question that was asked. The question on the table is education. I have fought for education. I've been endorsed by the Georgia Association of Educators because I did not vote for the Opportunity School District. And I have always fought for increased funding for our schools. I'm the only one who said to the Atlanta Jewish Times when they asked us about the backdoor vouchers known as the Student Scholarship Organization that will divert $100 million to private school scholarships next year. I'm the only one who said that money should go to pay for our teachers. Because what we need to do to help our educators is increase their pay, make certain that we only arm them with resources and not with guns, that we make certain our children have the technology in the classrooms that they need, that the monies that go to those East Blocks to build those buildings can actually go to pay for people to work in the buildings, and that we absolutely invest more money in poor children, and children who speak English as a second language, children who live in rural communities, and children who have special needs. Because special needs children cost more money as well as everyone else, and we need to invest in those dollars. As a House Minority Leader, I fought to make certain that we also covered school bus drivers and cafeteria workers to make certain that they had access. Because it's not just about the educators in the classroom, it's about who picks our children up, who's standing in the classroom with them as paraprofessionals. They should all be making a living wage and more.
Thank you. This is to each of you. What is your position on the continued celebration of the Confederacy in Georgia, and why is it is important for all of Georgia?
I grew up in Mississippi, where the state flag is the Confederate flag. As a sixth grader, I had to go and visit the last home of Jefferson Davis, Beauvoir. I had to look at the graves of slaves while people walked around with t-shirts that celebrated the Confederacy. And so when Charlottesville happened, when the question was raised, should we keep the edifices in Georgia celebrating the Confederacy, my answer was unequivocal. There is no room in the state of Georgia for hate, and there is absolutely no reason the state should be paying to celebrate hate in Georgia. Now, I know it's going to be a complicated conversation about how we deal with it, but there should be no question that Confederate monuments that were put up not in the post-Civil War era to celebrate the dead, but were put up in the 1920s to terrorize black families. There is no justification for the state to pay for that. And there's no justification for allowing anyone to spend taxpayer dollars to celebrate racism and hate and terrorism. Now, we can talk about how we get it done, but I think there should be absolutely no question that our history as Americans has to recognize that post-Civil War, those Confederate monuments and that Confederate flag were designed to terrorize black families, and that should never stand.
Thank you. Ms. Evans.
Thank you. It is a hurtful and painful past that we have here in the state, and we need to recognize that and quit celebrating this hate. I could not agree with my opponent more on that statement, and I am proud to have the endorsement of Governor Roy Barnes in this campaign, who made the brave step to change our state flag and remove that hateful Confederate battle emblem. We've got to do more. I think that local government should be able to decide what they want their roads to be named and what kind of monuments they want to have in their town squares. And if folks want to take them down, they should be able to take them down. I fully support that. When it comes to Stone Mountain, I think that that part needs to reflect the full history, because it's important to tell the whole story. Just like in a campaign, it's important to tell the whole story. And I agree with my opponent that we should not be taking credit where credit is not due. And that's why it continues to hurt me and pain me that she is trying to take credit for saving full-day pre-K, when the people that saved full-day pre-K were the hard-working teachers who came to the Capitol and said, we will not stand for this. We also need to make sure that we're telling the full history when it comes to what happened during the Civil War period and the painful and dark days that followed. And as the governor, I'm committed to working with the NAACP and all of the organizations across the state to make sure that we're telling the full story.
Thank you. I would just say, it's one of my pet projects. America is the only country in the world that celebrates a failed insurrection against itself. It is totally unpatriotic to create all men and women are created people. Thank you for that. Okay. If either of you, this is what you are not elected either as candidate, Democrat candidate, or as governor, how will you be involved in public service going forward? Ms. Evans.
Thank you. Well, public service is something that's important to me, whether I do it in an elected capacity or not. And I fully intend to be your next governor, so let's make that really clear. But I will certainly be working for Stacey in November, no matter what. And if I am not successful in either the primary or the general, I will be working to open the doors of opportunity for those who need access, particularly around higher education. In my private business, I have supported with time and dollars those organizations that were seeking to open up scholarship opportunities for students, particularly those who were first generation like I was. From a successful law practice, I was fortunate to be able with my family to endow a scholarship at the University of Georgia School of Law specifically for first generation college students, because I remember how difficult it was for me to piece together the financial resources I needed, not just for tuition and fees, but also for books and for food. And I want to make that path easier for students who didn't have a great start in life. And I expect that that's what I will be doing if I'm not sitting in the office as your next governor. But that's my intention at this point, is to be your next governor, so we can do much more on a much broader scale to help students.
Thank you.
Well, I intend to win, but what I will say is this. I've spent the last 7 years as the Democratic leader flipping Republican seats into Democratic hands. We've won seats in Paulding County, Douglas County, down in Sly County and Sumter County. We've come close in other counties, so close that they decided to try to change the lines to stop us. And what I will do is what I've done, which is I will raise money to support our candidates. I will continue to register thousands of voters, because we have still more than 350,000 African Americans and others who are not registered to vote in Georgia. The New Georgia Project, which I founded, is now its own standalone project, but I will continue to invest in that project, because not only has it stood shoulder to shoulder with the NAACP in fighting against voter suppression, we've won. We forced the Republican Secretary of State to restore 42,000 illegally canceled registrations. We forced the police to stop following black families in Sparta when they were voting too much in Hancock County. And I will continue to do the work of voting rights, because that's the work my parents started for me. They were part of that work then, and I will be a part of that work now, but I will also always stand as a strong Democrat to get Democrats elected up and down the ballot in all 159 counties.
Thank you. From the audience, what would you do about the increasing insurance rates for auto and homeowners in Georgia? And there have been lots of increases going forward. Ms. Abrams.
Part of the challenge is that Georgia has a constitutional system that sets aside insurance rates, and they're governed by our insurance commissioner. So make sure you vote all the way down the ballot in this primary and in the general, because we often vote at the top when we go home. The insurance commissioner in Georgia actually sets the rates. They accept the rates that are proposed by those companies. But until we have a governor who will veto laws that make it easier for those companies to come into our state and hypercharge our people, then our insurance commissioner only has a few tools in his or her toolbox. And if you vote for a Democrat, it's going to be a her. And so my mission will be as governor to work hand in hand with the Democratic insurance commissioner to ensure that the laws that we pass do not make it easier for us to hurt our families, raise rates, and then hide our hands by letting the insurance commissioner pocket money from the those insurance companies that contribute to their campaigns.
Thank you.
Please vote for insurance commissioner. That's a very important position for consumers. And we need a Democrat in that position because it's been way too long since we've had them, and consumers are not getting the protection that they need. This is an office right now that just protects corporations, and we cannot allow that to continue. But as governor, I will put my business savvy, my small business experience, my lawyer hat on, and we will scour those pieces of legislation, laws on the books, and regulations to see where we can make changes to make it so that the governor and the legislature has more power to protect consumers in this regard. And when it comes to the state health benefit plan, which so many Georgians have coverage under, as governor, I will make sure that those deals that we make with the insurance companies are fair to the consumers and fair to those that are insured, and I will be doing everything in my power to protect. And what I want to do as well is set up a consumer protection office, several offices throughout the state, constituent services offices, so that folks can get access and get questions that they need when they're having trouble with insurance, when they're having trouble with state benefits, when they're having trouble with state government. You shouldn't have to come to the Capitol to access your government and get the help that you need. And I want to make sure that we're serving people better.
Thank you very much. What is your position on increasing the state minimum wage, and what would be your program in that bill? Pro or con?
We've got to raise the minimum wage. Georgia has the lowest minimum wage in the entire country, $5.15 an hour. I find that completely unacceptable. Waiters and waitresses make the same $2.13 an hour that I made when I was waiting tables to feed myself in the late 90s. We have got to make a change. We need to work toward a $15 minimum wage. We're going to have to do it incrementally, and I believe we also have to start with the state government and how we're paying our state employees, because we have many state employees making less than $10 an hour. So the state has to lead by example. Then we work on raising the minimum wage for private employers, and in the meantime, we need to work on protections for workers' rights, paid maternity leave, time to go care for an elderly parent or a sick child, and making sure that Georgia is not just a good place to do business, as the Republicans like to say, but also a good place to live, work, play, and raise a family.
Last week, I was proud to be in the West End receiving the endorsement of Care in Action, which represents the domestic workers in the state of Georgia, because they are the bulk of those who make $5.15 an hour or less. And they chose me as their candidate because I have introduced legislation year after year to increase the minimum wage. I've introduced legislation to allow for paid family leave and to allow families to take off time to take care of their loved ones. I'm also the only candidate who's proposed an earned income tax credit, because until we can get the state to increase the minimum wage everywhere, we still need to put money back in the pockets of our families. And through a state earned income tax credit that will be coupled with the federal earned income tax credit, we can actually put money back in the families' pockets while we try to raise the minimum wage. In addition, I've proposed a child care tax credit that for a family of, let's say a family that has a toddler, you would get $5,700 in your pocket to pay for child care if you make $40,000. This is important because the minimum wage has to go up so that people can afford to take care of their families. And that can only happen if we don't just wait to change the minimum wage. We invest no matter where you live, no matter what you do, in putting money in your pocket so every family has the freedom and opportunity to thrive.
Thank you. So for each of you, what are your regrets from your previous predecessors? Is there something you wish you had done differently?
I would say that on the issue of HB 515, which was a redistricting bill, I wish that I had the money in the Democratic caucus to hire consultants to review every single line of that multi-page bill. Part of my job as leader was to manage all of the legislation moving through the legislature. And that job means that you have to delegate responsibility, but you also have to trust the folks you're working with, even if you know that they may be slightly untrustworthy. Unfortunately, even though we did our best job to understand what that bill did, it got past me that they had slipped in two districts, 105 and 111. In those two districts, they tried to increase their likelihood of winning. The minute I found out, I reached out to the Senate. I asked the Senate to try to fight it. They did their best. It didn't work because we're outnumbered. Republicans outnumber Democrats in the House and the Senate. And that's when I turned to my friends in the NAACP, my friends Eric Holder and the National Democratic Redistricting Coalition, the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. And they banded together and they have filed a lawsuit. Unfortunately, the Republicans are not telling the truth in their lawsuit, and we're fighting back against that as well, but that is a regret that I have. I wish I had known then what I know now, because I have fought hard to make certain that we elect as many folks in the state as possible and that we respect the will of the people.
Thank you.
Thank you. And there's been some interesting stories written about the redistricting position, and I would encourage y'all to listen to Senator Vincent Fort, who was in the Senate, about what actually happened during discussions with the minority leader, and who was actually at fault for what happened to those districts and that dilution of black voting strength. My regret is this. I'm proud in this campaign to have the endorsement of the Georgia Federation of Teachers, because I stand with teachers, because teachers changed my life. There was a vote a few years ago that y'all will recall as the Opportunity School District, and I voted for that bill, and I regret that. I did not appreciate the distrust that existed between the education community and the state government enough, and I am very regretful that I did anything to widen that distrust. And I'll tell you the reason I did it is I was trying to be responsive to the families in my district. I represented a South Cobb district. It's when you think about Cobb County, a lot of folks think, oh, they get the best public schools ever. The South Cobb area struggles. We have high numbers of students that qualify for free and reduced lunch, high transiency rates, and the families in my district came to me, several parents, saying, I cannot get the school board to pay attention to our side of Cobb. They want to put all the money in East Cobb, and we think this is a way to make sure that we get our fair share of funding, and I wanted to give them that fighting chance. I regret that. I have no intention of working on any legislation like that. I want to invest in the community school model, and that's why I'm proud to stand with our teachers.
Thank you very much. So each of you, it's a closing statement, and if you have something, got another day, you understand, if you got time to text them over, we're here, the facility is here. Ms. Evans,
Well, I want to again say thank you so much for having me. Thank you for taking your time out to be here. I'm excited to be running for governor. I'm excited to have the opportunity to continue the work that I've done as a small business owner who worked with President Barack Obama to help give access to capital to small businesses and help create and retain more than 2,000 jobs in Georgia. I'm excited about continuing my work on voting rights and voting access, work that I did independently as an independent citizen, starting the New Georgia Project, which has registered more than 200,000 people, 93% of whom are people of color in the state of Georgia. And we didn't just do Atlanta, we did all 159 counties. I'm proud of the work that I've done as Democratic leader to fight Republicans when they tried to put a $150 million tax hike on our families, to put money into transit for the first time in 45 years, to do the work to save education and lift up families, but also to lift up my fellow members, to give every member in the Georgia General Assembly who wore the Democratic badge in the House an opportunity to shine. And I take that responsibility seriously, because leadership isn't about getting credit. Leadership is about making tough decisions, standing by those decisions, but investing constantly in our people. And as the next governor of Georgia, I will ensure that every Georgian, no matter where you live, no matter what your story, that every Georgian has the freedom and opportunity to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Evans.
Thank you for the opportunity. I am running to make sure that hope and access is available to all of us, because it's simply not what it used to be. We've talked a lot about access to higher education. I want to restore the original promise of hope. And I'm proud to be the only candidate in this race that has put my name on legislation that would create needs-based aid for college in the state, because it's an important priority. It's not just something that I talk about, it's something that I believe in, because my life would not be possible without financial aid for college. But access to good jobs are not there like they used to. We've got to work on raising those wages. We've got to support small businesses just like we do the big ones. And we've got to level the playing field when it comes to doing business with this state. Right now, less than 1% of state contracts go to minority-owned firms. As a governor, I will change that by appointing strong, diverse leaders that decide where those contracts go and make sure that we increase minority contracting in this state. We're taking too many people out of the job market to begin with because we're putting too many people behind bars. I want to make real continued progress on criminal justice reform, in private probation, in the private prison system, start treating drug addicts like those who need access to treatment and not like criminals. And when you're behind bars, you're going to get access to GED, job and skills training, so that when you get out, you can get to a job. We're going to ban the box, and we're going to end the cash bail bond system for low-level offenses so that we can put more people back with their families and back to work. access to voting is not what it used to be. You know, we used to have 45 days of early voting in this state. Now we have 21. My opponent co-authored the bill that led to those cuts, co-sponsored it, put her name on it. And I voted against it. I stood with those who said this was wrong. So let's vote on May 22nd to put a Democrat on the ballot